Once again, good afternoon. Welcome. We'll go ahead and get started. This event, Contacting Your Representatives, is hosted by Welcome.us, and we are a nonprofit, non-government organization founded in 2021 to equip and empower Americans to participate in the work of welcoming newcomers, primarily through sponsorship. Our goal for today is to help inform you of some recent policy changes affecting private sponsorship and to learn about the how and why we might contact our representatives on behalf of private sponsorship. We're joined today by our partner, No One Left Behind, to help demystify what it means to contact our congressional representatives and to hear from sponsors and welcomers across the country like you from their own experience speaking with their representatives. My name is Krista Kartzen, and I'm the Senior Director for Sponsorship Initiatives with Welcome.us. I'm also a sponsor, which means I know how eager you all are to get started. So first we'll cover the most recent policy updates to center our discussion today. As you know, the new administration signed an executive order 2 weeks ago impacting private sponsorship programs, including the processes for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, also uniting for Ukraine and the Welcome Corps. I'd like to center our conversation today around the status of each program as of now, February 6th, 2025. I want to emphasize that policy changes continue to happen, and as they do, you can find the latest updates on our website by following the link shared in the chat. President Trump's administration has announced an end to CHNV and a pause to the U4U program, which means Americans cannot submit applications to sponsor individuals from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, or Ukraine fleeing violence and persecution. It also means pending applications are not being processed and no new travel is being authorized. Reports suggest that the administration may soon announce the immediate termination of existing humanitarian parole for everyone who entered the U.S. through the processes for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, or the Uniting for Ukraine sponsorship programs. If this occurs, parolees who do not already have another status, such as temporary protected status or TPS, or who do not already have a pending application for TPS or asylum, will be considered by the administration to be out of status and unauthorized to be in the U.S. They will likely receive a notice to appear in court, where they may be prioritized for removal from the United States. You can find a more thorough explainer about these policy changes, as well as a practice alert that was sent by the American Immigration Lawyers Association to its members about the expected termination of humanitarian parole status on our website. And again, that will be dropped in the chat. All newcomers who entered the U.S. with humanitarian parole and have not applied to an alternative legal status should seek advice from a competent immigration attorney and work with them to seek alternative status immediately if they desire to remain in the U.S. Alternative status options may include temporary protected status, asylum, lawful permanent residency for Cubans, and other alternatives, as you see on the screen. Our guide for navigating alternative legal status options, which we'll share in the chat, provides more information about how to identify legal assistance and alternative status options for which newcomers may be eligible. Now, refugees who are privately sponsored through the Welcome Corps program, which is that last row on your screen, this was paused as part of the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program pause, but those who have arrived have a permanent path to citizenship and do not need to seek alternative status. They should simply apply for their permanent residency after 1 year arrival to the U.S. And again, while refugees who are already here in the United States through the State Department's Refugee Admissions Program still have a pathway to permanent residency, the program itself remains paused, which includes private refugee sponsorship. This program is paused for a 90-day review effective January 20th of this year. This means that no new applications can be submitted. applications are not being processed, and applications will be approved only on a case-by-case basis by the Secretaries of State and Homeland Security, and all flights to the United States have been canceled. As my colleague shares a link to our policy explainer about this program in the chat, I want to clarify that the Welcome Corps was a U.S. federal government program administered by the U.S. State Department, and this is the program that is paused. Welcome.us, the organization that we represent, is separate from the Welcome Corps program. We are a nonprofit, non-government organization founded to equip and empower Americans to participate in the work of welcoming. And this is an important distinction because Welcome.us is not a decision maker about the policies that we're sharing today. And we are not the administrator of these sponsorship programs. So we cannot make decisions on specific cases. This is the work of the US federal government. And this brings us to our primary purpose for meeting today. In the midst of these uncertainties of the rapidly changing policy environment, sponsors have reached out to us asking how you might share your experience of private sponsorship with policymakers for consideration. I've heard from sponsors who have used our materials to contact your representatives and shared your different experiences with us. Some people's representatives have called back and asked for more information. Some folks have received an email response back, and some people don't hear anything altogether. I've also heard from folks who care about private sponsorship but hesitate to contact your representatives, and I can certainly understand that. Your questions and experiences led me to examine what actually happens when we contact our congressional representatives. Why would they care about what I have to say and what messages stick? I recently heard a former policymaker say that as an elected official, he felt like he was constantly walking through a wind tunnel of thousands of sticky notes with all the requests that he received, and only a few really stuck each day. And that image resonated with me because I've always tended to think that other voices are so much louder than mine that it really wasn't worth reaching out. But learning from our partners and honestly, you, our community of welcomers, I've begun to understand more about how our experience does matter and how our requests can really stick. And in this window of time, as President Trump's administration is actively assessing sponsorship programs and making policy decisions, these efforts really do make a difference. But don't take my word for it. It's a privilege to be joined today by Andrew Sullivan and Sonia Norton, representing our partner No One Left Behind, to help demystify the who, what, when, where, and why of our contacting our congressional representatives. And I might add, at the end of the webinar, we have time to answer some of your questions for Andrew and Sonia, so feel free to reach out during the Zoom, using the Zoom Q&A function, and we'll do our best to get to those. Founded in 2014, No One Left Behind is the nation's oldest charitable organization dedicated to evacuating, resettling, and advocating for former interpreters and U.S. government employees eligible for the Iraqi and Afghan Special Immigrant Visa Programs, or SIV. In addition to providing direct services helping evacuate and resettle Afghan and Iraqi allies, No One Left Behind is a leading voice championing these allies in U.S. policy decisions. This advocacy for Afghan and Iraqi allies depends on providing clear, reliable information to the U.S. government officials on the threats facing these allies to inform policy decisions. And this includes supporting veterans and community members in sharing their stories to remind our federal representatives why keeping the promises made to our Afghan and Iraqi allies matters to their constituents. Andrew and Sonia, thank you so much for joining us. I'll give it over to you.
Thank you so much for that great policy update and for having us, Krista. Private sponsorship is a critical pathway for welcomers, including many veterans, to help keep the promise to our Afghan allies, and No One Left Behind are proud to partner with Welcome.us. And of course, we're thrilled to speak with all of you today. Reaching out to your members of Congress can be intimidating, but it is such a valuable tool. And so we love any opportunity to help demystify outreach to your representatives and to answer the great questions so many of you have raised about sharing your story and your support for private sponsorship. But first, hello, my name is Sonia Norton. I serve as Director of Advocacy for No One Left Behind, which means I lead our communications with the U.S. government partners and manage our coalition leadership. Before joining No One Left Behind's team, I served as a congressional staffer for about half a decade in the House of Representatives. In that time, I staffed 3 members of Congress, and that included managing one of the largest correspondence programs in the House, and then setting up a new member's constituent correspondence program as well. Following the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, I served as Congressman Earl Blumenauer's senior legislative assistant and helped lead the introduction of the Afghan Adjustment Act and helped secure additional visas for the Afghan Special Immigrant Visa, or SIV, program to make sure we can continue bringing eligible Afghan allies to safety.
Hey, thank you so much, Sonia. And thank you, Krista and the Welcome.us team for having us. I'm Andrew Sullivan. I'm the Executive Director at No One Left Behind. I've been with No One Left Behind for just under 2 years, previously serving as the Chief Advocacy Officer before taking my current role. I came to No One Left Behind largely because of my previous service as an infantry officer in the U.S. Army, serving for over 9 years in different locations, including Iraq, Afghanistan, Latvia, and others. It was really during my Afghanistan deployment that I truly understood the integral role that our wartime allies have alongside our troops. And that was largely because of my work with our unit's linguist, Amadi. I spent as much time with Amadi as basically any other soldier in my unit. He was a fixture by my side, doing the invaluable work of communicating with our Afghan National Army partners as we conducted joint operations. And really, he served as the sole means of communication with the local Afghan communities that we operated in. Now, thankfully, Amadi made it to the U.S. after 7 years of service. He arrived on a special immigrant visa. He has a great life established in Seattle, but there are unfortunately still tens of thousands of other Afghans waiting on their special immigrant visa. The SIV program and private partnerships are integral to keeping the promise to our wartime allies, and I'm happy to address your questions today. The new Congress and administration were both sworn in just weeks ago, and as they navigate what comes next and realigning major programs with the national security priorities they've laid out, your stories are going to be an invaluable part of that conversation. There's so much happening in the public discussion and in standing up the new operations, the priorities can get lost in the sea of updates. So your personal stories are more important than ever to provide clarity on what matters to your community and how policies can align with the broad public support for safe, legal, and planned programs, just like the SIV program and private sponsorship.
So when you're deciding whether to contact your member of Congress, one of the first hurdles can be figuring out your best avenue for reaching out. Congressional offices in both the House of Representatives and the Senate have DC offices and offices in their district. Both receive emails and calls, but they have different areas of expertise. DC offices are generally home to the policy staff. These are the staff making policy recommendations for the member, including which bills to join, how to vote on the floor, how to ask which questions in committee, and which policy areas to really prioritize. District offices are based in the community, and their expertise is generally community outreach and casework support. If you were already paired with or named a newcomer to sponsor prior to the pause on private sponsorship, you may be thinking about submitting a request for help with your case. This would be handled by the district office, and it's an opportunity for your representative to get to know your private sponsorship case and help raise it to the Departments of State and Homeland Security, who are overseeing, like Krista mentioned, the case-by-case exemptions to admit eligible newcomers in the spirit of the president's executive orders. To open a case with a congressional office, you'll submit a privacy release form so that the office can conduct any inquiries regarding your case, and federal agencies can provide them with any information related to your case. Most offices will also ask for information about your case, like what you need help with, which agencies are involved, etc. Once you've submitted the paperwork, usually the district staff will review the case and then will be in touch with you about whether they can elevate the case with the relevant federal agencies or any other questions that they have. If you want to share your story with more attention to specifically supporting policy, for example, the US government resuming some form of private sponsorship, you're probably here to learn about contacting your representatives by phone or email, which is generally received by the DC office. Each member of Congress determines their own processes for incorporating constituent outreach into their policy decisions. And so I want to run through some of the most common practices that I've encountered. For phone calls, offices will track what issues constituents are contacting them about and how many constituents contacted them from each side of an issue. Offices receive hundreds and sometimes thousands of calls in a day, and so being calm, polite, and concise with your message is not only kind, but also helpful to having your perspective heard. For emails, and when I say emails, I'm including messages submitted through your member's website, offices will track the same numbers. How many messages has the member received on which side of which issues? For emails, offices will often give more weight to personalized emails. So, for example, 10 personalized messages are usually more impactful than 10 identical messages would be on the same topic, even if the personalized messages are expanded out of the same base script. Across the board, the messages that resonate the most are respectful and share your personal experience. An email that shows you took the time to share your story and how a policy or decision impacts you and your community is the most impactful single message to send. And especially with phones, it is also a numbers game. Having multiple constituents reach out on private sponsorship, for example, could be what gets it included in a member's nightly readout about constituent priorities. As Andrew said, with so much in the news and so many policy decisions being made, everyone on this call can, if you are so moved, help keep private sponsorship front of mind for your federal representatives.
I know it can feel intimidating to reach out. It may feel like only the most activist members of your community are expected to contact members of Congress, but that's not true. I encourage everyone here to remember that your representatives can only make informed decisions on how to represent their community when they hear from you about what's important to you. We've touched on the importance of numbers for reaching out, but even if there's just one person reaching out to share their experience and perspective, that is impactful. If staff and the member are on the fence about something, constituent outreach can be that way to help them act in support of your topic.
Your outreach can also be what empowers a staffer who agrees with you in their recommendations to the representative. Speaking from experience, a memo with a recommendation that includes X number of constituents reached out on this topic, or a community member shared that this would help them because of Y, goes miles further than the same memo that isn't backed up by constituent outreach. And if it gets intimidating to reach out, I encourage everyone here to remember that the people on the other end of the call are also people, often from your state or your city, usually the interns or the most junior staff doing their best to capture the information that you want to give them.
Yeah, I remember the first time I contacted my member of Congress. It was back in 2022. And although I hadn't joined No One Left Behind yet, I was reaching out on behalf of America's wartime Afghan allies. I sent over email to my member of Congress an opinion piece that I'd authored for my local newspaper. The opinion piece was about my experience with Ahmadi, my translator, and my belief that the U.S. had an obligation to stand with our Afghan allies by passing an Afghan adjustment. I specifically asked my member of Congress to sponsor legislation to that effect, to sponsor that Afghan adjustment. I followed up my email by calling the office and sharing my story with a staff member. I shared my viewpoint of our moral obligation to America's allies, and I respectfully asked that the staff member relay to the member that I believe they should co-sponsor that legislation. Now, an Afghan adjustment hasn't been passed into law, and I say yet. I'm still optimistic that we will get it reintroduced and passed this Congress. But although that hasn't happened yet, I still loved having my voice and opinion heard by my representative.
Reaching out is not something that everyone wants to do, but I hope that you can all leave with a clearer understanding of the power of outreach and the logistics of how it helps shape the policies that your representatives are working on. Before we hand it back to Krista to run through Welcome's fantastic resources available for contacting your representatives, we want to really reiterate 3 key takeaways. First, lead with kindness and clarity. The interns and junior staff often manage the phones, and the call is still an important tool to share your perspective and story. The most effective message is calm, clear, and includes your name and zip code so that team members can pass on the message to your senator or representative. Second, share your personal connection. Sponsors and welcomers like you have the most compelling personal story that your representative is likely to hear on private sponsorship. Messages like that I received as a staffer stick with me to this day and stick with the representatives as they navigate policy decisions on behalf of you and your community. And even if the response that you get on the phone or over email feels insufficient or frustrating, your outreach does make a difference. The numbers, how many people reach out, and the statistics you contribute to, as well as the stories you share, make an impact on how an office considers each issue. With that, thank you for all that you are doing to welcome newcomers, including our Afghan allies. And with that, we will hand it back to Krista to speak to Welcome.US's fantastic resources for contacting your federal representatives.
Thank you so much for your valuable insights, Andrew and Sonia. After hearing from our friends at No One Left Behind, if you're interested in contacting your representatives or engaging your community to join you in this effort, we've got something for you. Welcome.US created a guide, some sample language and tools specifically for Americans reaching out to their congressional representatives on behalf of private sponsorship. You can access the guide on our website via the link in the chat. And when you open it, it's a Google Doc that looks something like this. Section 1 of the guide links to language and links for contacting your representatives, generally in support of private sponsorship programs or to support the continued legal status for individuals who you've welcomed here through humanitarian sponsorship, for example. The links and resources provided in this section, Section 1, go to your congressional representative's office in Washington, D.C., where policy is made, as Sonia explained. And Section 2 of the guide includes links to find and contact your representative's local offices. It includes information about that privacy release form that Sonia mentioned. And this is the office, that district office that you'd be contacting when submitting a case-specific inquiry. And the guide explains this all in more detail, but I wanted to just take a moment to call out these 2 use cases. If you're interested in sending an email to your representative's policy office in Washington, D.C., you'll click on the link provided in the guide, which opens up a web page that looks like this and asks for your street address. Now, this example shows a fictional street address from my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, just for the purposes of showing you what this really looks like. So you'll type in your street address to accurately search for your representatives, but your address will not be shared with your representative. Only your name, city, state, and email address will be shared, as you'll see on this screen after clicking Next. This page shows your representatives in both the House of Representatives and the Senate, and includes a pre-populated draft message that you can send as is or personalize with your own experience. As we heard from Sonia and Andrew, your personal connection to private sponsorship is very meaningful, so you may consider doing that here. And when you click Submit, your representative's offices will receive an email with your message that looks something like this. We received one message from a sponsor who used this tool, and they tried to submit the form, but then they received an automatic email reply explaining that the office inbox doesn't receive emails from like form submissions like this as a standard practice. We know that the vast majority of offices will receive these messages, but if you receive a notification like this, you can still use the search function and language provided in our guide to find the office's contact information and share your message directly from your own email. And now sending an email or even making a phone call can make you feel like you're just one person, one sticky note blowing in the wind of a tunnel of thousands of other sticky notes. But let me show you this. Sponsors and welcomers from all 50 states have used this form to contact their representatives in support of private sponsorship pathways and newcomers. You can see the darker the state, the more messages have been sent. And as you find value in using this tool and sharing it with your network, we'll see the shades of your state get darker, and your representatives will better understand that their constituents care about private sponsorship. Sonia, I hope you don't mind that I'm sharing this, but when I first asked you about the top 3 takeaways you would want to share today, you immediately said all you wanted when you were a congressional staffer was for constituents to simply be kind as you listened to their concerns and requests. But as we spoke, I was immediately struck that this won't be a problem at all for our sponsors, because you are all some of the kindest, most compassionate people I know, and I am not exaggerating. I cannot begin to tell you how encouraged I've been from your kind messages of support, even in this time of uncertainty. If you're at all skeptical about this claim, please allow me to introduce you to Liz, Angela, Ashley, and Joan, who are compassionate and passionate welcomers from 4 states who have contacted their representatives on behalf of newcomers. Each of these women have a unique experience of contacting their representatives that is genuine to their communities, personalities, and stories. And it's an honor to pass the mic first to my fellow U4U sponsor and colleague at Welcome.us, Liz Kemery, to share her story.
Hey, thank you so much, Krista. As Krista said, we're colleagues here at Welcome.us, and I will say before I was a member of the team, I was a sponsor with our family for a family of 4 Ukrainians that we welcomed at the end of 2022. And this was completely new territory for me. So we were very eager to use the toolkits and the checklists and the how to start a fundraiser guides that were on Welcome.us. And that's what led me to pursue a position there. I mean, the chance came up to join the team, and I was very eager to do that because it really made our sponsor journey run smoothly. So I'm still using all those tools, and I was very excited to have the opportunity to use the Contact Your Rep guide, and filled it out, did it myself, shared it with my parents and my siblings, and then I thought, I can hit more people with this. We had an incredible community and a very wide network who helped us to welcome the family in 2022. And some of them we still see on a regular basis, at school or, friends and family of ours. But some of them, like, my sister-in-law's uncle is out in Wisconsin, and he donated $1,000 to our fundraiser when we welcomed the family. And clearly I don't see him. So, but he's still very interested. He's still very supportive in the family and in sponsorship programs. So while I was kind of thinking through this, we haven't been fundraising for a long time, but I still have access to that GoFundMe page. And I put together a message to post on the page that would then also get emailed to all of our individual donors. And I took it as an opportunity to give them an update on how the family was doing, especially for people who don't live close to us and who don't know that, the 7th grader is really excelling in his studies, and the youngest one turned 4 and had a great Paw Patrol birthday, and like all those great things. And then to really, let them know that there's been a lot of changes going on right now that are impacting the programs and their legal status here. And all of these people supported us in welcoming them over 2 years ago, and we need their support now. So we have this great tool. It's easy to use. It takes 5 minutes of your time. We help you figure out who your federal representatives are. And there is a, pre-written message that you can send. Even better, as we've heard, if you can personalize that, or if you can reach out with a phone call, that does even more. But at the very least, if you can continue to support this and the family who we've welcomed, that's great. So that was one thing that I did. And then I'm just, again, sort of thinking about those networks and the support that we had. Our school did a great in-kind donation drive. I shared this with the principal, and the next morning he sent that out in his principal message to our faculty and staff there, and to the families who had supported us for that in-kind donation drive when the family was moving into their apartment. So I think, the other welcomers that are on the call with us are going to share some fantastic stuff that they're doing. There's also some really simple things that you can reach people quickly and broadly who are warm to your message and are very supportive of sponsorship and the people that you welcomed.
Thank you so much, Liz. I love that the same community who came alongside you to donate when the Ukrainian family first arrived is still so invested in helping them continue to thrive from Pennsylvania to Wisconsin. And I'd love to now pass it over to Angela, who has a remarkable story of sponsoring more than 20 Ukrainian families and is now tirelessly acting on their behalf by reaching out to her representatives. Angela, thank you for joining us. You're on mute.
You guys are so much better at this than I am. But I just want to thank first Welcome.us, because from the first moment that I connected with a family through your organization, I've just been overwhelmingly impressed with all of the assistance that you gave us through the sponsorship program and ever since. So thank you for your leadership in that. So yeah, I'm very similar to Liz's story in that I sponsored my first family back in 2022. brought them to our small rural community of DeWitt, Iowa, and our community fell in love with this family. I personally, and I'm, a school teacher, this is just kind of something I wanted to do to give back, right? Because we all have big hearts. I personally went ahead and sponsored a couple more families. And just to make a long story short, my community was just so grateful to have the opportunity to help the families that I brought to DeWitt, Iowa, that they came to me and said, how can we help? And ultimately, we ended up establishing a 501(c), and we're able to obtain temporary housing for, it was actually 7 different properties for temporary housing, loaned vehicles, et cetera, and so forth. We brought together a beautiful coalition of business leaders and educators and parishes and other not-for-profit organizations like the Rotary Club and the Lions Club. They all came together for us and began fundraising. And at this point in time, we've got about 76 people who we've helped to come to the area. Like Liz, we've had a couple that have relocated to other areas. So I actually have a few people that we sponsored living in Chicago. We've got a couple in Florida and so forth. But it's just had a huge impact on our community, so much so that we've been asked to give our story and share our program, the way that we approach sponsorship, with 7 different counties in the state of Illinois, or of Iowa. And we now have 2 additional chapters of what we do in other counties of Iowa. So we've impacted a lot of people, and not just from the humanity perspective and the feel-good perspective, but also economically, which is why I want to share with you how I've been reaching out to different individuals and asking them to be in touch with our policymakers. One of the things that we did is, or that I did, is I picked up the phone and I immediately called all those people, those individuals who were very vested in bringing the large donations to our organization. I talked to them very personally, and I'm in a very red state. So these people are very, very supportive of the Trump administration and their policies. But I did call them directly to make sure that they understood the actual impact that those policies have on our individuals, people who they've come to know and to love. And as a result, those individuals took it upon themselves to write personal letters and even get in the car and drive to our representatives' offices. So their involvement is critically important. So that's one thing that I would say. Additionally, most of our communication with our community and all of our donors and the organizations that have been helping us, it's mostly through Facebook. So I did go out to Facebook and I put a note out with, and actually using the wording and the links and so forth provided by welcome.us. I put that information on our Facebook page, along with some reminders and asking the community that has always come together so beautifully to continue to come together and make sure that we get the word to our policymakers that these policies impact our community very directly. I would like to share that in my first communication directly with, and I do have a personal relationship with one of the Congress people in my area. In my first communication with them, they genuinely adore the people who we've sponsored to come here, but genuinely did not understand the actual impact that this was going to have on them. So this is really important that we're doing this work and we're being very clear in our communication that this has an impact. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to share. But in addition to that Facebook page, which, by the way, was awesome, I copied as a partner our local Chamber of Commerce. That Chamber of Commerce then had our message out with all the businesses who are impacted by this, both in terms of business they do with the families, as well as a lot of them have people working for them, right? So I think we actually have had more response to our connection through the Chamber of Commerce than any place else. But I did that. Also, I've pulled together some of the other organizations that are huge stakeholders, like, for example, our schools. Our schools took that same exact letter, sent it out to all of their teachers, staff, families, and said, we have families impacted, right? So through that, we've had a lot of response. So our schools, our business leaders, our representatives directly. I did use every individual who I knew who had a connection to Our policymakers, I've gotten them all directly involved. I'm sharing updates with them and asking them to be our advocates, and they are coming through for me. So I will stop there.
Angela, thank you. I am so very encouraged by all your whole of community efforts. Thank you so much. Just extraordinary. But not all of us have to start an organization in order to do this work. So I'd love to pass it over to Ashley, who, like Andrew, initially contacted her representatives on behalf of Afghan newcomers in 2021. Ashley, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Krista. My name is Ashley Glimashinsky. I am the Administrative Director at We Choose Welcome, which is a national organization that believes we can have both humane policies and secure borders. So we're a grassroots community who choose Christ-like welcome. And I actually got started in immigration because I sponsored my husband. So he's from Poland, and we met and decided we want to get married. And so I sponsored him through the fiance visa. Before I did that, I thought immigration was easy. Little did I know, it was definitely not easy. But I want to say that I sponsored my husband, which is someone that I knew and loved. And many of you also sponsored someone that you know and love before they came to the United States. But so many of you have also sponsored a complete stranger who you had never met before. And they have probably, I want to bet, become like family to you. I want to recognize what courage that took, how that was just a really big step of faith for you to reach out and say, like, yes, I want to welcome you to my state, to my city. I'm going to help you resettle in the United States. And I want to encourage you that as you think about that family, calling your representatives on their behalf is a next step of courage that you can take. So like Krista mentioned, I used to live in a guest house for refugees that provided temporary housing. It was a ministry in my area. And while I lived in that house, the Afghanistan fell to the Taliban. So suddenly we had a lot of Afghans that I was living with. I took them grocery shopping. I taught them how to use the stove. I taught them English. And I shared a lot of meals with them, a lot of really great meals with them. And as I got to know them and as I held their babies and just became friends with them, I realized that they were on temporary status and that status was not certain. And I didn't agree with that. I wanted to do something. And I realized that picking up the phone and calling my representatives on their behalf was just as tangible a way to help as teaching them English or as taking them to the grocery store. And it was my community with them and my proximity with them that caused me to contact my representatives. Because I realized that I wanted them to be safe and stable and secure, and I wanted them to stay in the United States. So it was not easy. I will admit the first time I called, my voice was shaking. I didn't really know what to say. I had a script. I thought I was ready to go, but I was really worried. And it was intimidating, but like Sonia said, I realized it was actually quite simple. And I feel like this was a real tangible step I could have done to help my family or my friends that felt like family. So just to tell you what it looks like to call your representatives, usually when you call, like Sonia said, you get a young staffer who just says like, hello, this is so-and-so's office. And I say, hello, my name is Ashley. I have a message for my senator. And they say, yes, okay. So I leave a brief message and talk to them. Sometimes I get a recording and I just leave that same message, but it's a really polite little back and forth conversation. It's not a lot. And then it's done. It maybe takes about a minute, 2 minutes tops. So I can call both of my senators and my representative in less than 10 minutes. It's a really easy thing to do. It may seem daunting at first, but it does get easier. And now I have to say that I have their phone number saved in my phone, both their DC and their local offices, so that I can call them if I'm sitting at a stoplight. I can call them while I'm waiting for the water to boil on my tea. These are just really easy things that you can do to make a difference in the lives of the people that you care about now. So thank you. And I hope that you'll take that courage today.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ashley, and thank you for all you do to foster the We Choose Welcome community. I've been personally blessed by your leadership, and I'm so grateful for you. And now we've got one more hopeful story from Joan, who has started to actually see the effects of sponsors in her state reaching out to their representatives. Joan, thank you for sharing with us today. Tell us about your experience.
Thank you, Krista. Yeah, I'm Joan Walton. I'm from Zaman International. We're a nonprofit located in the Detroit area. And up until 2 weeks ago, we were Michigan's lead private sponsorship organization for Welcome Corps. So we had the pleasure of helping a great many families reunite and others welcome newcomers to Michigan. But we still had quite a few cases that we were hoping to see come to fruition that had not. So we took advantage of Welcome's leadership and the January 22nd webinar and had as many of our private sponsor groups as possible attend. And afterwards encouraged them all to use the link to contact their representatives. And in addition to using the form letter, the email that was already written, to insert a paragraph or two about the story, particularly about the families that we were hoping to sponsor. We have two Afghan families that we're trying to reunite with people who are already here in Michigan. And about a week later, after that, they did that. And about a week later, one of our group coordinators emailed us and said that they got a call from the DC office of their representative, and they wanted to speak to her. So she came into our office, and we called the staffer in DC, and he said, the first thing he said to us, yeah, I wanted to talk to you because we've gotten quite a few emails with the same subject matter line. So they are reading them. I guess that's the first takeaway, right? So he asked us a lot of questions. We told him all about Welcome Corps. We told him all about the Afghan case in specifically that group was trying to sponsor. And it was really a great opportunity to start a dialogue with that one representative's office. And since then, we've also gotten a response from an email response from one of our senators' office. But we're going to continue to advocate for some of our other Afghan cases with this representative now that we've sort of got our foot in the door there. But I want to say that even if you didn't get an email or a phone call back, it doesn't mean that they didn't read it or they haven't heard what you have to say. You are now most likely on the email list of that representative, and you're going to start getting their newsletters if you didn't already. You will know when they're in town and they're having a coffee hour or a town hall. If you want to if you're more comfortable in having a face-to-face conversation, that's a great way to do it. It is our job, I think, to continue to put a voice to those who can't be heard right now. There's a lot of avenues that will open up for us to do that. So thank you.
Just extraordinary, Joan. Thank you so much. Hearing your story of receiving that call back and thinking about the map that we shared earlier helps me to really realize that's not just a colorful map of our country, but these messages are being received by real people. And the more messages they receive, the more stickiness we see. So I just want to thank you, Joan, Ashley, Angela, and Liz. It's such an honor to be walking alongside you in this moment, and I'm so grateful for you sharing your experiences with us. As promised, we're going to turn our attention back now to a Q&A. So I want to welcome back Andrew and Sonia, and welcome Anya. Folks, Anya McMurray is the president of Welcome.us, and she also has 8 years of experience working as a congressional staffer. So I've asked her to join us today to help answer questions as well during this time. And actually, the first one is for you, Anya. We've heard from sponsors who have contacted their representatives in support of sponsorship programs, and they've received responses back that have to do with border policy or other immigration issues that aren't about private sponsorship. Another sponsor who hasn't joined us on this call today told me that her representative wasn't familiar with refugee sponsorship at all. So she had to explain what it was and how it benefits Afghan allies and the American communities. What advice do you have for these sponsors in communicating our specific support for private sponsorship pathways? So how do we cut through the noise of immigration rhetoric that is going around right now and clearly express the unique nature of private sponsorship?
It's a great question, and I think this is it's a constant challenge. I really loved how you opened it up with your acknowledgement of the representative walking through the halls and feeling all of the things coming at him or her. I think that is very common. I think that's true of the people who are answering the phones also. And what they often have before them are answers to the expected calls that are coming in. And right now, because immigration is very much in the news these days, people are expecting and getting lots of calls on immigration generally or around the border generally. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that when you're calling and saying, you may be getting lots of calls about the border, about immigration. I want to talk to you about something different. It's really important that you hear what I'm saying, that this is about a specific program. This is about private sponsorship. I want to tell you a little bit about private sponsorship because you might not know what it is. And then tell them a little bit about the program that you're talking about. Is it Uniting for Ukraine? Is it Afghans on parole? Is it Welcome Corps? Is it the process for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, or Venezuelans? These are all private sponsorship programs. Explain what that is. Explain that it's a legal program, that you were vetted by the government, that the person you sponsored was also vetted. Tell them, as we've heard folks say, what you did specifically. This is different than, again, what people are doing at the border. You're not criticizing any of that. You're just wanting to distinguish what you're talking about. You helped pay for the plane ticket. You helped find housing. You helped kids get enrolled in schools. You didn't ask the government to do that work. You did it as an official sponsor. And then I think you say, and now the rules are changing. We followed the rules and the rules are changing. And the person that I sponsored who's thriving here or who is so ready to come and who I've paved the pathway for is ready to contribute, can't come or may have to leave. And it's not clear why, because private sponsorship works and you know it because you did the work. I think a message like that begins to distinguish itself from other messages they're receiving.
I think that makes so much sense, Anya. And truly, sponsors and welcomers who are tuning in now have the lived experience to explain this yourself. You're the best messenger for your own story. But to help you out, a colleague is going to drop in a fact sheet that we developed about private sponsorship. We developed this in response to some folks who have reached out, just saying I'd like a little bit more substance to reference as I have and navigate these conversations. So we developed this resource for you too, if it's helpful. Now I want to turn back to Andrew or Sonia, because we regularly receive questions about our Afghan allies in these convenings, and your presence today is such a great opportunity to pick your brains a bit, being so close to this population. We know that SIV or the Special Immigrant Visa is not a private sponsorship pathway, but there are a significant number of private sponsorship applications pending review for Afghan allies, including SIV holders. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the recent policy changes impact Afghans? For example, will SIV applications still be processed, and what is the status of SIVs already here in the US?
Thank you, Krista. Yes, that's a great question and certainly something that we've been working to provide clarity for both in our community and with our partners in Congress and in the government, as like we hit on before, there's so many updates and it hits right in the cracks of a lot of them. But so a quick kind of overview on SIVs specifically. Applications for the visas themselves, so Afghans interviews, their processing of applications continues to move forward because it is distinguished from the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program in from that executive order that has paused private sponsorship as well. We appreciate, and I think there are likely folks on this call who were participating in Welcome Corps and the private sponsorship like programming to support Afghan allies, including SIVs and refugee arrivals. And so there is some distinguishing between like SIVs, applications continue to be processed, and we're working with folks to find kind of viable ways to continue to arrive. But the biggest impact across refugee admissions and SIVs for our Afghan allies is that traditional reception and placement services that are provided oftentimes by resettlement agencies and importantly through private sponsorship are provided by the people on these calls, by welcomers. those services through the RAs, through resettlement agencies, have been paused, including for SIV arrivals. And so welcomers in formal private sponsorship and through local organizations are as important as ever, maybe more important than ever. And in doing the sort of personal support and connecting new arrivals with the resources and the transition that is usually provided through these pathways, because SIVs are uniquely still able to arrive. And that's a really important reflection of like their unique nexus and this pathway that exists in immigration that can be so technical, but I hope that kind of gets to the core of those questions. And also for folks, there may be folks, especially since you've gotten so many of this question, if folks are interested in continuing that private sponsorship work or contributing to the effort for folks who are continuing to arrive or who were here in that 90-day window when a new arrival does receive those services that have been suspended because of this pause, to reach out to us. Well, whether it's through welcome.us, sorry, Krista, to voluntold you all to pass them on to us, or you're always welcome to reach out to us. We have an email that's tracked very regularly at info@nooneleft.org, and we're happy to really make sure to connect to that. Obviously, it's a dynamic situation, but we know that the welcomers here clearly are paying attention to this population that are near and dear to our heart, and we want to help you help them.
Absolutely, Sonia. No harm done. We're so grateful for your partnership, and would love to connect you to info or Sonia, because all ships rise, right? The next question is really for any one of you, my advocacy experts on the screen. The viewer says, should we go to our representative's office in person, like even just show up without an appointment? And does it matter like the number of people who come? Would that make a difference, even if maybe a senator or a congressperson isn't present?
I'm happy to hop in on this one, having fielded a lot of those. Certainly, if you have the time and an office is nearby, I think especially for folks, district offices will be the most relevant here. Absolutely, feel free to drop by. Many of them, because of security concerns, especially in recent years, don't accept drop-ins in the same way as they did maybe 5-10 years ago. But it can still be worth it if you're driving past and it's interesting, but I would really drive home the same points for this. I would treat it similarly to a phone call. We want to keep it quick. You want to get your personal story and the implications for your community front and center so that people can relay the message. If there's someone who is more senior on the team who's available to sit down and really have an in-depth conversation, that's fantastic. And that's also unusual because there's so much happening and so much that people are fielding. So making sure to share your message, even if it's just with the person at the front desk, is important. And again, leading with kindness and understanding for the capacity of work that they're taking in so that they can pass on your message and the importance to the community.
Makes sense. What about, is it better to have multiple people reach out about the same case, and do letters signed by multiple people, the example given is like 40 or 50, make a bigger impact than just one person?
I can chime in on this one. And I think all of the above is good. And I think one of the, Angela really made this point, and I think it's an excellent one. In addition to doing it yourself, which is great, getting your friends to do it, which is great, also think about who in your network has a position of power or a voice, maybe through a relationship with your representative, or maybe through the representative's chief of staff, or some other person who is senior in the office. And that relationship it might be a donor, but it might also be someone who goes to church with them. It might be someone who lives down the street from them. Think about who in your network touches that person. And that can be a really powerful way to get a particular story through. I also think it's worth thinking about town halls. Often members of Congress during the recess time when they're back home have town halls, and airing an issue there also allows people in your community to hear it and creates even more pressure to act. That's why letters to the editor are also really important.
That makes sense, Anya. Thank you. And I got kind of this picture of if a friend of a friend, if you're just doing networking and a friend of a friend reaches out versus just like a cold email through LinkedIn or something, I'm more inclined to say, oh, you know this, you know, a mutual friend, let's grab coffee more readily. That makes sense. Next question. How frequently should I send the same concern to my federal representative?
I can hop in. Oh, sorry. Do you want to take it?
All use on employees by all means.
All right. So we definitely encourage folks to reach out on a regular basis, especially until you get a representative or a response from the staff or from the team. Certainly doesn't have to be, you know, wake up in the morning and call in the afternoon, but with some frequency helps to make sure that it breaks through the noise, and that it, like, just again with capacity issues, making sure that it has an opportunity to be heard. So reaching out with what feels like an appropriate kind of calm frequency to you.
That makes sense. We heard about letters. We got another question, and we've got just a couple minutes left. So let's go rapid fire to knock out a couple more questions. Is snail mail letter more effective than an email?
No, don't send snail mail. It will take forever to get there.
All right.
Vetting is a disaster. Don't do it.
Next, why does welcome.us require your address when contacting your representative?
I can take this one because it's how we figure out who your representatives are. We don't retain that information. It's just part of the tool to determine who you should contact.
And I would add, you don't have, like, across the state, you don't necessarily have the exact same representatives. You need to know your district too, which that was a learning for me in this process. So I wanted to share it with you all.
And also, quickly, sorry, on the receiving end is important that it's included for your representative so that they can confirm you're a constituent and make sure it gets the appropriate priority.
That makes sense. So the more information you share, the better. The more you lead with clarity and kindness, the better. All right, next question. My member of Congress already supports private sponsorship, but he is a Democrat and in the minority. We really need Republicans to support this. How can that be done?
So your member is going to have members in the Republican Party that he works with on a myriad of issues. So, you know, each member has members of the opposite party that they routinely pair up on all sorts of things, from immigration to agriculture to you kind of name it. So it's important to keep it as a salient issue for your Democrat member, and also encourage them to make it a priority to reach out to Republican members to try and advance it forward.
That makes so much sense, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you, Anya and Sonia. Thanks for entertaining my rapid fire questions. We're just going to go ahead and wrap it up now and move on to our next steps. Again, you know, reviewing what we learned at the front with the policy changes, do consider applying for alternative status as eligible. Use our resource, engage with an immigration attorney to identify what your options are. Contact your federal representatives. If you've been inspired by our talk today, consider doing that. Consider crafting a personal, concise, and kind story to share, and use the tools and resources and learnings that we discussed today to equip you to do that. And stay updated on policy changes by visiting the welcome.us website for timely information. Join us for our next webinar on February 27th, which will be on sharing your story of welcome with your community and local media. We'll bring some other sponsors and welcomers to share their stories, just as we had in this venue. So you'll get to hear from more folks in our community. And as things change, welcome.us strives to be a center of gravity for welcomers across the country to find belonging, connection, and resources. I hope you found all three here today. For those who have been with us on our webinars in the past, I hope you see that we've incorporated more and more of your feedback in each session, delivering concise and candid content relevant to your needs. We do this best when we hear from you, and part of how you can inform our work is to complete a quick survey that will appear on your screen after this event ends. If you asked a question in the Q&A function that wasn't addressed today and you're still seeking an answer, you'll have the opportunity to raise it again in that survey, and we'll respond if we have an answer. On behalf of all of us at Welcome.us, know that your compassion and dedication to supporting newcomers continues to inspire us every day. I look forward to seeing you all again on February 27th. Until then, thank you and be well.